glad that she's given him advice to give up the bike. The question is that this bill will now read a second time. Give the call to the member for Fairfax.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I too wish to give my best wishes to the member for Fowler and welcome back, and you're looking fighting fit. I look forward to ensuring that our healthy love of debate will continue, which is what it's all about. But indeed, there are times we stop, we pause, and we take stock of what's important. And for you to have your wife here today too, certainly from this side of the aisle, rest assured we've been with you and good to see you in good health. Mr Deputy Speaker, to move on to more sombre issues maybe in talking about the budget, can I say, as a relatively new member of this House, how delighted I am to be speaking about this year's federal budget, a budget that ultimately does represent fairness, security and opportunity for the existing generation of Australians, but also sets Australia up for the years ahead. And let me start, Mr Deputy Speaker, by making the point that context counts. Context particularly counts for the Australian federal budget, given that we are such an open, liberalised, free market economy, working within a highly integrated international economy. And what we see within the global economy is renewed investment and optimism. We see some of our key trading partners, key investment partners, having their own economies find renewed optimism. We're finding this particularly from the likes of the United States. We're seeing it also with a bounce in China. And this sets the scene, Mr Deputy Speaker. It sets the scene for better days ahead for the Australian economy and therefore the everyday Australian citizen. And that is why you see that the economic transition that is underway within Australia is gaining momentum. That as we come off the back of the mining investment boom, we see an Australian economy that is diversifying across other sectors. And we are seeing growth come into those other sectors while our resource exports are still looking for a positive trajectory moving forward, as are our service exports. And this is why you see a growth forecast of 2.75% in 2017-18 and then up to 3% in 2018-19. Now, this all translates, Mr Deputy Speaker, into jobs. It translates into jobs. And jobs indeed has been the mantra of this government from the get-go, and it will continue to do so. And the budget that has been tabled by the Treasurer is one that promotes jobs, but it promotes it not in a fiscally irresponsible manner that those opposite are so well renowned for, a hold-nothing-back stimulus by any account approach, but rather a fiscally responsible manner, Mr Deputy Speaker. Because so much as it is optimistic, based on that broader international context and strong growth rates, you see the underlying assumptions about Australia's growth within this budget actually below those forecasts by other authoritative bodies, including the IMF. And so you have relatively conservative assumptions on growth. You also have a determination to ensure that real growth in payments are restricted to 1.9%. And so as we enjoy higher economic growth and therefore receipts increasing, we are holding a very firm fiscal discipline of restricting an increase in payments to 1.9% or lower. This also means that as time goes on, Mr Deputy Speaker, we are going to see something that Australians have been screaming out for years, and that is we are going to see that our everyday expenses do not need to be borrowed for come 2018-19. Now, that's actually a very large commitment, and it's one that we have measured on very conservative assumptions. What it means, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that the Australian nation will go back to the days it has not seen since the coalition was previously in government, that we have our recurrent expenditures being covered by something other than debt. This is all about that often expressed comment, we need to live within our means. And indeed, we're going to be in a position where we are no longer borrowing just to keep the wheels in motion come 2018-19, with net debt peaking in 2018-19 and then declining over the forward estimates. And so a fiscally responsible budget, Mr Deputy Speaker. But it's also practical. It's also practical because running government is not a matter of academia. The government took the very responsible decision to withdraw measures that were in previous budgets that we could not get through Parliament. And so you have about $13.5 billion of budgets withdrawn at the time of this most recent budget being tabled, which is why you also see that the government is trying to meet the Labor Party halfway over several measures, while also dealing so productively with the crossbenchers and, of course, all of those in the Senate. Because we need to make sure, Mr Deputy Speaker, that this budget passes so that small businesses in particular can be the winners. We do know that small businesses are the main ones that are creating the jobs throughout Australia, and in particular in regional and rural areas that have been most hit with unemployment struggles over recent years. And that is why I'm very excited to be from a region where over 98% of businesses are small businesses, that the government has already changed the definition of a small business from one with a turnover of only $2 million a year to those with a turnover of up to $10 million a year. Now, this budget has also extended the $20,000 instant asset write-off. Small businesses, certainly in my part of the world, Mr Deputy Speaker, have been celebrating this $20,000 instant asset write-off. Keep in mind, of course, that by virtue of extending the $20,000 instant asset write-off while simultaneously seeing the increase in the definition of small business to $10 million turnover, means you have thousands of businesses across Australia who, for the first time next financial year, will be able to make good use of that instant asset write-off. And cutting red tape, regulatory reform, continues to be a focus of this government, but we recognise that there are regulatory constraints imposed by other tiers of government, which is why I welcome the $300 million funding package in this year's budget to incentivise states and territories to reduce their own regulatory barriers, again improving life for small business. And it's worth at this point, Mr Deputy Speaker, to ask what would the Labor Party propose for small business? Well, they've already made it very clear in their questions in today's question time, where they are honing in on questions around the total cost, the aggregate cost of the government's enterprise tax plan. What they have so far failed to realise is by prosecuting the case against that aggregate package, the aggregate cost of our proposed tax decreases for business, they are by default saying they are going to take a tax increase policy to the next election. For nearly half of the cost of the government's enterprise tax plan has already been legislated for Mr Speaker, already legislated for. So with the opposition screaming today about the cost of tax decreases, every time we hear that from now on, we know that what they are really saying to small businesses, what the opposition is saying to any business with turnover of less than $10 million a year, is they want to see them pay higher taxes. The Labor Party have confirmed today they want small businesses to pay higher taxes. They are opposing legislated tax decreases. They're not having a moot debate about prospective policy here, Mr Speaker. They are very clearly talking about legislated tax decreases being reversed, and that is why those in small business know that the Labor Party is no friend of small business. But it's not just the fiscal responsibility, the practicality of this budget, nor only what the budget does for small business, but indeed the boost for the broader economy through game-changing infrastructure, with a commitment to over $70 billion for transport infrastructure, road, rail and air. Now, of course, we know that there's an $8.4 billion equity commitment for the
7:30 p.m. I propose the question that the House do now adjourn, and I call the member for Kingsford Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In